rivals go head-to-head this weekend when the Pirates face the Cubs at Wrigley.
Swing and a miss. He stuck him out.
The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
Oh, it's the Herd on ESPN Radio. Wherever you may be, however you may be listening, thanks for making us part of your day. Presented by Progressive Insurance. All of our guests via the Subway Fresh Take Hotline and simulcast on ESPNU. Great show today. Tony Dungy stops by. Pedro Martinez later in the show. He's got a new book out. I'm not a big believer in living through the rearview mirror. I'm kind of a windshield guy. But it's fun to look back. With Pedro today, we'll look back. I think sometimes, and I make this mistake, a lot of people make this mistake, we forget how good it is now. Oh, the good old days. They weren't that great. They really weren't. We still look back at Michael Jordan. It's like, take off your high school Letterman jacket. LeBron's here. He's amazing. Enjoy it. Half the people in this country, when Tiger Woods, over a decade, was accomplishing things in a brief time that nobody ever had, half the country was lamenting it. Talking about Jack. Dude, Jack's great. Tiger's great. Live in the moment. Michael Jordan used to play. Been 15 years. Now he's not. Enjoy the moment. The NFL's never been better than it is right now. More passing, more scoring, more great athletes, more wild games. We've got more ways to access it. Fantasy football, gambling, TV, radio, digital. Every time Brady faces Manning. Not a lot of those left, man. Maybe one left. This year, I think they're playing in Denver. Maybe the last one. Enjoy it. Sit down. Get a cold craft beer. Bowl of soup. Don't leave. 4 hours. So when Pedro Martinez is on today, I don't think we'll ever duplicate how great it was. I don't think we'll ever duplicate. Do we remember how great it was in 2003, 2004? You can't recreate that mountain for the Red Sox. Red Sox-Yankees play, sometimes I watch an inning or two, sometimes I don't. 2003, 2004, I was glued to it. Red Sox, 86 years, hadn't won a World Series. You can't recreate that. Now it's not as special. Can you go back to 2003? Think about this. The Yankees won 101, Red Sox 95. They were the dominant rosters in baseball, but one had owned the other. It didn't even make sense. I mean, Manning occasionally beats Brady, right? I mean, teams occasionally beat Jordan, right? The Red Sox had better teams at times and couldn't beat the Yankees. Bucky Dent, the 26-27 titles, and here the Red Sox go again. And they've done it several times, building another great roster. And Pedro Martinez and Manny, it was incredible. So here they go in 2003. The Red Sox finally get the Yankees. It's a Game 7 in the American League Championship Series. It's Pedro and Clemens. They're gone. It's the 11th inning. It's tied. And Aaron Boone walks up for the Yankees.
Here's Boone. He swings. A long high drive. Down to left field line. It's over. Aaron Boone has homered on the first pitch from Wakefield. And the Yankees have won the pennant. The Yankees are waiting for Boone at the plate, and they're jumping on top of him. Aaron Boone with only his third hit of this series, and he is the hero.
Curse of the Boone Beano, said the New York Daily News. You're a New England baseball fan. No! So the following year, baseball, Red Sox, Yankees, you can't it'll never happen again. The following year, the Yankees win 101 again. The Red Sox win more 98. Both teams, I can argue, are even better. They get back to the American League Championship again. We know the Red Sox eventually won down 3-0, never been done, come back to win the series. But what I go back to is Pedro Martinez, who's on in an hour and a half. This is how great the rivalry was. So Pedro Martinez, at the end of that year in September, faces that Yankee roster. And Pedro was unbelievable. In the height of the steroid year, you couldn't hit him. And twice in September, he goes out against the Yankees, and the Yankees just crush him. And after the game, Pedro Martinez says this to the press.
I mean, what can I say? Just tip my hat and call the Yankees my daddies.
And then they get to the American League Championship Series. And here it is, Yankees. It's Yankee Stadium. And it's Pedro. And it's game 2. And this is one of the great moments, perhaps the greatest by a crowd in the history of American sports. So it's Pedro, the dominant guy against the rival Yankees. They've never beaten the Yankees. They don't have a World Series. Here we go in the American League Championship Series, game 2. Pedro's on the mound. And remember what the Yankee crowd did.
These fans are amazing. Joe Torre saying before the game, no quote gets left untouched. Somebody says something in the papers, finds its way into a chant here at Yankee Stadium.
Is that unbelievable? It never, ever, ever will get that good again. It won't. You can't recreate that mountain. Stop looking at the rearview mirror. I mean, we got to live in the moment. NFL's never been better. There's never been anybody that manipulates a game like Tom Brady. There's never been a guy who's 6'9" and can be a point and a center like LeBron. Baseball was so unbelievable. I just hope we realize, because today I'm going to go back, and I never do. I'm not into that stuff. But today I'm going back to Pedro Martinez, who, by the way, when the crowd chanted in New York, "Who's your daddy?" had this to say.
It actually made me feel really, really good.
It was so good. It was just so good. All that angst. I mean, I've said this about LeBron. He's already won 2, 3, 4. It doesn't feel the same. It was that fight to validate his stardom. The king, that fight in Miami. When he won that first, and I'm sitting there on my couch, and I'm getting goosebumps. It's like, wow, I'm watching the next guy. Then he wins another. Then he gets to another. Even if he wins in Cleveland, it's more about Cleveland and their kind of pathetic sports history. LeBron's proven he's amazing. He's been the best player in the league for, how many years? We can argue who the best players of all time. I don't think it'll ever be the same. I don't think it feels the same. I don't rush to the TV to watch LeBron like I used to. I watch the games, but I don't mark them down. I don't gather with my wife. I don't talk and think about him all day. Pedro Martinez in an hour and a half. That "Who's your daddy" chant? I mean, it's just... that's one of the funny things about sports fans. Sports fans have some amazing moments. We always talk, about the silliness and the ugliness and the third deck fight. But there are times in the history of this country where sports fans have been unbelievable. I watched that Miracle on Ice. I watched that about twice a year, and I saw that recently. The movie was on. It was so incredible in Lake Placid. That crowd was so loud that Russian players acknowledged they thought the fans were going to attack them, that it was intimidating, that the United States crowd, because we were in 1980, gas shortage, Russia was a real threat, they just started attacking like Afghanistan, and the Russian players were like, we're in America, we were intimidated for our safety. And nothing would have happened in idyllic Lake Placid, but that is sometimes crowds just take over arenas, and it's an amazing thing.
Want more of The Herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Welcome back to Herd on ESPN Radio. This is a bigger story in New York than the rest of the country, but because of the inefficiency of the Knicks, they're an utter grease fire. James Dolan runs the organization, and they're a mess. And Isiah Thomas was the president, one of the great players in the NBA history, but he was the president of the Knicks, and it was an utter disaster. And during his time there, a jury found him guilty of sexually harassing a former team executive, and James Dolan paid for it. Now, Madison Square Garden, to the very end, defended him, and the jury when they could have found him punitively wrong, did not. But I watch this story. Sometimes I watch stories develop, and then I watch how we cover stories. And it's interesting about the O.J. Simpson trial. I remember the O.J. Simpson trial, like most of you, very well. People forget this. Even during the verdict, before, and after, many people supported O.J., didn't think it was possible he could have killed two people. I can remember it, even though it's, 15 years ago? I remember at the time living in Tampa during the verdict. Why? Because he was good-looking, well-spoken, had famous friends. He was rich. O.J. Simpson overwhelmingly had the support of a lot of people during that trial, not just racial support. It was not just down racial lines. Like, the initial reaction in America was, no way. No way. How can you say that? You don't have any evidence. Because he was good-looking. Because he was famous. Because he was rich. If O.J. was less attractive, not famous, never been on TV, was your typical broken-down NFL running back, would he garner the benefit of the doubt? Probably not. And I think it's interesting with Isiah Thomas. I thought when he ran the Knicks, he was a mess. I later found out some really discouraging news in this sexual harassment lawsuit. But I wonder this. As we point at Isiah, let's turn the mirror on us. Let's point at us. What if Isiah, one of the greatest players ever, went to the Knicks and built a powerhouse? Like Pat Riley did with the Lakers, the Heat, and sort of with the Knicks. Would these stories be less discussed? I wonder. Because right now, because Dolan is so incompetent and Isiah was so awful, these stories gain real steam. How could you hire him? But what I see continually in sports is, if the executive or player are amazing, we don't want to talk about it. That, to me, is just as big an issue. Is with Isiah, you know where I feel on Ray Rice. It bothered me how the NFL came down and did nothing. But what I find continually on these stories, look at the reaction based on the success. Fans do it too. T.O.'s a bum, T.O.'s a bum. Oh, he's our guy. We love him. Ray Lewis can be booed everywhere except Baltimore. The Barry Bonds, how is he treated in San Francisco? They knew he was guilty. He's booed everywhere else. A-Rod's cheered in New York now, hated, reviled everywhere else. And listen, Isiah Thomas isn't my kind of guy. He's not my kind of executive. These stories make me sick, and I wouldn't hire him if I was James Dolan. There's no way I'm going back there. I couldn't do it. Not my cup of tea. And I don't necessarily. I had to sit next to him once at a USC football game, and I got up. I thought, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I just had read too many ugly things. But if Isiah was super successful as an executive, Stanzik, you don't think there'd be a little bit of willingness by New Yorkers this morning to go, come on, everybody deserves a second chance?
I don't think you're off your rocker there, but how do you reconcile the fact that he was hired for the WNBA team with a sexual harassment?
Okay, well,
I think that's the problem here. If he's hired for the Knicks, you'd easily explain it, whatever. Don't want an idiot. But so
what you're saying
he's working with women and he has a sexual harassment charge.
Okay, if a person has a sexual harassment conviction, can they never employ women?
No, but you add that on to the fact that he was terrible as a general manager in the past.
Okay, so that's what we do. We add it on. But the point being, let's say he is a waste management boss, and there's a sexual harassment charge. Should he never be able to have a job and hire women? I mean, the question is, people make mistakes. He was convicted. Lots of people on Wall Street were. They're still working. What are the limitations?
No, but Ray Rice isn't getting hired to run the lingerie football league here. He's not getting hired to work with women. Isiah's just got hired to work with women.
But Ray Rice's, I think, fiance at the time totally takes him back and, in fact, righteously defends him. So I don't like Isiah, and I wouldn't hire him. And there is outrage and indignation. But if he was successful, would it rise to the level it rises to? New Yorkers this morning are outraged. Would they be if he was R.C. Buford's level of success and had built a dynasty over it? That's my point. We always point fingers at everybody. We never look at ourselves on this stuff.
Yeah, you're not wrong, but I think the larger problem is that he's getting hired to work with women. If a teacher has a relationship with a student, even if it's a great teacher, they never get to work with kids ever again.
That's children. Those are juveniles.
This is women.
No, it's women, but they're going to be adult women. Often 6'5", can handle themselves, adult, educated, smart. It's different with a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old. They're juveniles in our society. Our judicial system looks at that differently. Adult and adult crime, we look at it. Women have been empowered. They're physically, emotionally, professionally equals. They're strong. So I don't think you can say he can never work in a position that works with women. Again, that's very pious. I don't like him. He's not my guy. I wouldn't hire him. But are you saying he can never be in an executive position and hire women based on his history?
Yeah, but it's a female-dominated industry.
No,
it's not like there's 3 women in the office.
No, it's a female-dominated. Remember, a basketball organization. There's operations. There's scouting. There's coaching. Then there's employees, like your players. There could be 60 people with a Liberty, and the only women could be the players. He's really dealing as a president. He's dealing with scouting. I mean, when I've covered NBA teams, the GM's dealing with layers of scouts, accountants, the owner, the media. Not hanging out with the players. He has other people recommend hirings, drafting, acquisitions. So I'm asking the question here. I don't have a definitive answer. I'm asking the question on this. Discover the new Subway Chipotle Chicken Melt, new guacamole Subway Fresh. I'm not defending Isiah. I'm saying we are guilty as media and fans viewing things differently based on success. It's like the bottle of wine theory. Find a guy on a yacht with a bottle of wine, he's regal. Find him in an alley, he's a hobo. Same wine, same guy. Could be. We view it differently based on success and standing and location. And if Isiah was more successful and not a disaster, would we be as cynical and would we be as negative on this? Yes, it bothers me to no end. But the Seattle Seahawks just drafted with their first pick somebody with domestic violence. I would struggle more with that. Teams, Dallas Cowboys, Greg Hardy, 4 altercations, didn't struggle with it. All these things I think you have to be able to talk about. This will end up on a blog today. Cowherd defense. It's not defending. It's discussing. It's discourse.
Well, you're arguing that more talented people get more chances, and you're not wrong about that.
Yeah.
It's just this one is a little touchy.
Yeah, this one is a story where everybody's like, awful move, terrible. How can you do it?
Because it was.
Yeah, yes.
It is.
But what I'm arguing is if Isiah was successful, he would have a chorus of followers and supporters today on this move. That's the way sports works and has worked forever. I don't like it, but it's true. It doesn't make me happy, but it's true.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The greatest athlete that I never got to see was Sandy Koufax, and I truly believe that Pedro Martinez was the Sandy Koufax that I got to see. He has turned into an excellent broadcaster, and he just gave Keith Olbermann great credit on that. He's got a new book out called Pedro. So it's an honor to have you. To me, you are the greatest pitcher I've ever seen in your prime. And I always say this with athletes. I want your best 7-8 years. You came in with the Dodgers. They wouldn't let you be a starter. So it's interesting. Dan Duquette with Montreal acquired you. Then he acquired you later with Boston. Now he's in Baltimore. So he loved you. But when you were young, let's go back to your younger days. You were tiny.
Very tiny.
And you didn't have great control. Was there a point you thought, I'm never going to be a star. I'm not going to make it.
I never wanted to second guess myself. I heard it so much from other people that I don't think it was needed for me to second guess myself. And sometimes it would bother me mentally because maybe I was wrong. I started asking questions, but then once I got to the field and I was given the opportunity to show in the field what I was capable of doing, I had no choice but to say, what are they looking at? Because I was having unbelievable years in the minor leagues. I was having success in every level and against any league that you had me face, and it was unreal for me to not see the Dodgers interested
It's amazing.
in
You grew
seeing
up,
what I wanted to do.
You grew up in the Dominican Republic on a gravel road. There was no pavement. There's
No.
a picture of you in the book. Impoverished community.
Yes.
Do you believe, is it possible that because in the Dominican, I mean, the percentage of people who end up being stars, that poverty and that life actually makes you guys hungrier and better players?
I believe so, because if you look at the Dominican, 99.9 of the players that make it to the big leagues are poor. No one you can single out as a kid that was raised in a comfortable family.
So why didn't you ever use steroids? You could have easily. You were small. You had doubters. Everybody else was using them. Why didn't you?
To be honest, because when I heard that the results could go south and affect you some other places physically, I just said no. I'm gonna take my chances with what I have, and it was tough for me because I wanted to fill up the body that the Dodgers expected to see.
That's right.
And fill up the uniform and look good, but I couldn't. But I was pitching well, and I said if I'm gonna sacrifice my body over probably looking good, and probably who knows what would have happened in my life later on if I was to take anything. I had an irregular heartbeat that was detected early in my career when I first got to Vero Beach.
So you didn't want to take a chance on that?
No, I did not want to play with my life with it.
When did you realize, when did you start hearing about steroids? Because your numbers, and I write about this in my second book, you're Sandy Koufax. People couldn't hit you in the height of steroids. Clearly your numbers would have been even more dominant. When did you realize they were all through baseball? What year? Do you remember seeing athletes' bodies?
I remember, yeah, early in the 90s. Early in the 90s, after the 93 season, everybody seemed to be bigger and bigger and bigger every day. And I couldn't figure it out. And I was eating cookies and ice cream and proteins that the trainers would give me because I was dropping weight quickly. And I was a bad eater. I won't deny that. I wasn't a big eater. I was always picky to eat. And they had to give me shakes. They had to give me protein.
And it wasn't working.
And it wasn't working. I wouldn't gain any weight, or I at the end of the season, if I started at 185, I'll be like 168.
Did you resent guys who were on it? Clearly you were on the mound and knew guys were on it. They looked like Popeye with these forearms. Did it inspire you? Were you angrier? Did you take it personally? Could it have helped you?
No, honestly, because if you saw me out there, what probably describes me the best is the intensity I had, the determination I had to get you out. It didn't matter if you came over and kicked my butt in a fight. I wanted to beat you again, and I would look you in the eyes and say, I'm out to get you, and I'm out to beat you, and I wasn't intimidated. And that's the kind of challenge I wanted to prove myself that I was and that I belong and that I was better than the Dodgers ever thought.
I want to play a cut back 2004 when you had said the Yankees were so good, they're my daddy, and the crowd the following year in a game starts chanting this. Listen.
These fans are amazing. Joe Torre saying before the game, no quote gets left untouched. Somebody says something in the papers, finds its way into a chant here at Yankee Stadium.
So take me back to that. What are you thinking? You can clearly hear it.
Yeah, you can clearly hear anything they said, but at the same time, my duty was to block pretty much all that noise, feed off of it, and probably go and strike out a couple of guys and make quality pitches to get out of the situation so that I could stop the chanting. And I was really good at doing that. Anytime they were standing up and chanting, the louder they got, I don't know, it was, to me, easier to get someone out. I don't know if it affected me only, but some of the hitters.
You
probably,
kind of you like that environment.
I like that. I like to have the chant because it will force me to narrow down.
Throw in on it.
Yeah, exactly. The imaginary tube that you have that blocks everything else, and you're in that zone. And it helped me, honestly. And every time they chanted, I would just come out and strike out one or two or shut down the inning. Maybe unconsciously, it affected the hitter or affected the focus level that they had.
One of the great moments, perhaps the greatest moment in all-star history. I'm just going to take you back to 99 at Fenway. You are at the top of your game. First inning, in the height of the steroid era. I'm not indicting any of these players. Barry Larkin comes out. What'd you do to him?
Strike him out.
Swinging. Larry Walker followed. What'd you do to him?
Strike him out.
Sammy Sosa's up next. What'd you do to him?
Strike him out.
Yeah, I remember that. Next inning, Mark McGwire comes up.
He's gone.
Now, Matt Williams got on in an air. Jeff Bagwell came up. What'd you do to him?
He's gone, too.
Matt Williams thrown out stealing.
Yes.
Take me back. Was it in the moment? I know it's an exhibition. You were named MVP. Did that feel as good? I mean, how does that rank in your accomplishments? Because it may be the best all-star moment ever.
And the most unique one, probably, that you're going to see in history. You don't get to see the all-century players in a field at once, the ones that made the history that I was living, the ones that made the way clear for me. They were the little light at the end of the tunnel that you could see and follow. To see those guys, to see an all-star where the last man that hit 400 was being honored. To see them all crowd Ted Williams around in the flashing, the lights. That's the only time the jets that passed by Fenway were the lowest ever. And it shook the whole stadium when I was in the bullpen. It was a unique feeling for everything we did. And to have the kind of performance that I had in Fenway, my team, my stadium, one of the most unique stadiums in all of baseball.
It's goosebumps.
In an all-star where Ted Williams is being honored, the all-century team, the cream of baseball, the cream of the history of baseball was there to witness what I was doing. Not only that, I get to be the MVP. I strike out all those guys, and I get to be the MVP, and I'm handed out a trophy that I dedicated to Boston and the city and to everybody that was pretty much watching the All-Star game. But my biggest reward was being called back to the suite where Ted Williams was, and he took one of the programs, autographed it, and personalized it to me. And he told me from his own words that I was impressive, that I was one of the best he had ever seen. And to me, that was like, take the trophy and do whatever you want with the trophy. My trophy is right here. And that was hear those words from Ted Williams and doing in front of the history of baseball.
Pedro Martinez, the book is Pedro. I can't wait to read it. By the way, I was a Seattle Mariner fan.
Sorry.
I know, I am. You threw about 13 one-hitters. But Edgar Martinez at least fouled off a lot of pitches. Edgar was unbelievable.
I did not like seeing Edgar and Ichiro. Those two guys were pesky. And Edgar, the best at falling off 97 on the black, where you will probably wipe out anybody. Black away, up and in, he'll fall off. He'll get his hands in and fall off a 98-mile-an-hour fastball into the hands. And he will lead you to make mistakes because you have to be really, really, really good to hit your spot. I would say 8 out of 10 times. And Edgar was good to fall off 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 pitches. And I hated it. Being a power pitcher in a small frame was painful to me.
Absolute honor to meet you.
My pleasure.
Pedro Martinez coming to a broadcast network near you. Pedro, my Sandy Koufax. Just go look his numbers up. Go to YouTube today. Have fun. Some of the most indelible moments ever. It's The Herd.
Colin Cowherd.
The Thundering Herd Podcast.
Colin, loved your Pedro interview. It was obvious how prepared you were. That's why it was great. Mike in Simsbury. Mike, he is one of the seminal baseball athletes in my life, Pedro Martinez. I grew up on the other side of the country, and I was riveted with Pedro Martinez. I thought he was fascinating. This little tiny guy in the steroid era that nobody could hit. And I often find athletes that aren't the biggest, the strongest, they're sometimes the quirkiest and the most temperamental and the passionate guys like him. I've always said Sandy Koufax was not a big man either. He was a very good athlete, played some college basketball, I think. But thank you, Mike, for the shout-out. Mother's Day's here. Send Mom the best. 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. Special offers start around $29. Jeff Saturday, Super Bowl champ, one of my guys. Go back to your years in the NFL. The draft is over, OTAs start, and you have the rookies coming in. Let's talk about that. How long does it take, Jeff, for you to realize the guys the team drafted are either great or a bust?
From guys going to make it to All-Star, it takes time. But for guys who, just a slug, right away.
Slugs right away.
Right away, right? They get there, and, their work ethic is poor. You can just tell they don't want it. They don't want to work. They don't want to, they just don't want to put in the effort it's going to take or it's going to require to be a good player, whether it's film study or whether it's just attitude. The guy the way he walks around the field, or if he gets beat after a drill and he doesn't care, you could just see it right away that he just doesn't have that competitive, get it that you're looking for. And so, but it really does take a while to really see a guy who can come in and maybe help your team early a little bit, kind of fit a piece of a puzzle maybe, to a guy who can be a star. A perfect example is Robert Mathis. So Mathis is a 5th-round draft pick or something around there. He comes in, and you saw his athleticism. You knew right away, but he was a special teams guy. He kind of got banged up early, so he had to take a little time off because he's running down on kickoffs and kickoff return. And, those guys, it's just a violent – bam, and, dudes are out, right? I mean, it's just, thank God I got off of that after year one, so, but you saw his athleticism, and then you watched him develop his craft, and you knew. Then you saw it rolling and picking, and his leverage, because he was an undersized guy, he began to start sticking guys in the chest on the run game. And then he brought out this little hop spin move, and he begins to develop different moves in one-on-one pass rush.
Then by year 4,
he's ripping and roaring. You got a full-fledged all-star.
Anybody ever surprise you that you came in and you just didn't buy it at all year 1, and through that kind of work ethic, that, by the way, some would have said it about you, perhaps.
Sure.
That all of a sudden, years later, Gary Brackett. Was completely undersized.
Yeah, GB would be the guy. He would be the guy that surprised you because he comes in. He's a little Mike. I mean, he's a little man, right? Yeah, little mighty Mike, right? He's running around, but he kind of had this swagger about him. So he'd be your look team or scout team, however you want to define it. And he would go in and just make plays. But we'd be in shorts. I'd be like, GB, man, stop trying to show us up, and he'd do little dances, and he'd throw his feet a certain way to look all smooth with it. And you were like, dude, you would never do that in a game. I would kill you if I was in a game. I would wear you out. And you would say it over and over. He'd be like, nah, man, look exactly the same. And you saw him begin to get it. And he is a perfect example. You brought up he is a perfect example of a guy who you thought, he's just too undersized in a real game.
Too small.
Yeah, too small. He's gonna get swallowed up, right, by a big guard or whatever. And then you realize he is a hammer. I mean, the guy can flat out play. He's super smart player, so he could outthink you. You could see him process where the play's going to be and be there before you could get there. And he was a great example of a guy who just developed and worked and earned it and showed up and earned every dollar he ever made in the game.
Jeff Saturday, that heard on ESPN Radio. Tony Dungy on our show earlier today. He's on a coalition in Florida regarding domestic violence. Seahawks draft somebody with a background and allegations domestic violence. How do players see that? I mean, you want guys that help you win, but often your fathers. How do you deal with that emotionally? Bad guy, perhaps, great player.
Yeah, when you walk in, the one thing that's different for players, I think, than it is for fans or media is you have no say, I mean, if you're really honest, you're not a general manager, you're not a coach. Whoever they bring in is your teammate, whether you like him as a person, because has the guy done something in his past? Has he done something recently? Whatever it is, but you really have no say in who's getting brought in.
And you don't have to love everybody on that team.
Oh, no, you're not going to get along with it. I mean, say anybody, wherever you go to work. I mean, certain people you get along with and certain people you don't. It is difficult in that situation, I think, because exactly to your point, you have a lot of fathers now. You got guys who are taking life's responsibilities, and they really kind of see it for what it is. And it's tough. It's tough to swallow that pill where if you completely disagree with them bringing a guy in, but you really don't have a voice. You don't have a say. You may go voice it to your general manager or say it to your coach, or you may say it to the guy in particular. But they're going to, as a team, they're going to ask you, don't make a singular stand. You can say you don't believe, you if you were the GM, you wouldn't bring a guy in, but we would appreciate you not, addressing this specific situation. And they'll give you the one voice comment, right? They want one voice for this football team. You use Schneider as an example out in Seattle. He's going to be the guy who's speaking. They're not going to ask Sherman. They're not going to ask Earl Thomas. They're not going to ask these guys. And they're going to specifically try to push the media away from those guys because they don't want you to get into a situation where you're going to divide your team. And that's the way they see it. But listen, I understand that we focus in the media a ton on the bad characters in our game. And that's sad to see. And rightly so in some circumstances because we do have some knuckleheads who do some stupid stuff. And I get that's what makes – but they're, 98% of our guys are good men.
They really are.
They are.
Football's interesting, Jeff, and I've said this. You can be a diva in a lot of sports, but if Tom Brady doesn't have the support of his offensive line, he's done.
Done.
It is such about choreography, and you need your teammates for safety. You don't in the NBA or baseball.
Right.
If you don't have my back as a quarterback, I could have a life-altering neck injury.
That's right.
So I've always found, similarly to almost the American military, you depend on your teammates for safety, and it creates a coalition and a foundation that other sports don't have.
No, it is the greatest team sport there is because you spoke exactly right. Everything is dependent on the guy beside you. You're only as good as that guy. And so there is a different relationship. There is a different mentality that you going in that you have to find a common ground with this guy or this teammate so that you feel comfortable playing next to him. And whatever it is, you got to find it. But it's tough for guys because, like I said, guys in that locker room don't agree with what happened, but they got no say. Kid's drafted, he's there. What are you going to do? Now you're hoping the Seahawks force him to get help, force him to take, to get in counseling, to go to these advocacy groups for domestic shelters and really turn his life around for whatever his side of it is, however it looks. Let's make sure we're taking the right steps and process to get healthy and get better and be a better person, not only on the field but off the field, and turn what was a horrific incident into something positive if possible.
Jeff Saturday, good seeing you.
Appreciate it.
All right, lively show today. Chauncey Billups, Tony Dungy, Pedro Martinez was good stuff, and Jeff Saturday. The Herd on ESPN Radio.
Major League Baseball on ESPN Radio. Last season, the Pirates reached the postseason for the second consecutive season, only to be sent home early after losing the wild card. Will they return for the third straight year? This weekend they face the Cubs, who have plans to make their first postseason berth since 2008. The Cubs and Pirates. The pregame at 3 Eastern, first pitch at 4. Saturday on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app.
Whenever I hear somebody, doesn't matter, liberal, conservative, Fox, MSNBC, and they're too strident on something, they're outraged by something. I mean, I laugh even at this network. Some of the people I see on the air, I'm always wondering, how can you be that appalled all the time? I just don't get that worked up very often in my life. But, some of it's kind of an act, but you'll see certain people on all sorts of radio, TV networks. I'm outraged. I'm appalled. You're just selling soap to the public. Stop. Nobody's that appalled. Nobody's that outraged all the time. You couldn't be. You wouldn't be. You go to a mental health professional every day if you had to be like that. Nobody's that appalled over everything. It's sports. It's politics. But, it's very interesting about the Seahawks drafting Frank Clark from Michigan, domestic violence. And people are like, whoa, that's inappropriate. or people upset with Isiah Thomas being hired by the New York Liberty, and under his run with the New York Knicks, there was a sexual harassment lawsuit. Here's the truth about all this. We allow images in this country. Think about this. Money always is the deciding factor. If Frank Clark couldn't play, he wouldn't get drafted. He wouldn't get drafted. We allow it because he can play and make us money and win games and buy us a bigger house. Think about who controls images in this country. It's not people in Kansas City. Images are controlled. Video game images, television images, movie images are overwhelmingly controlled by Madison Avenue in New York, the advertising community. It's on Madison Avenue. And in Hollywood. Movies, films, video games, financing, it comes from New York and L.A. Overwhelmingly. That's where the money in this country comes from. There's 1 million cities. 2 of them have most of the money, New York and L.A. Chicago, as great a city as it is, isn't even close. I can buy a beer for $4 in Chicago. Cocktails $20 in New York, L.A. It's a different ballgame entirely. Look at the real estate. $400,000, I can get a condo in Chicago. I can't buy dirt near the ocean for under $2 million right now in Los Angeles. Go look at the prices, Park and Madison Avenue. Go buy something nice on Lexington. Forget it. That's where the money's at. That's where the capital's at. That's where the financing at. That's where the dollars are at. That's where the decision makers are at. And that's where the images come from. And whether it was misogynistic hip-hop stuff in the 80s and 90s, which L.A. and New York were okay with because it made everybody money, but in the end it raised a generation of young people, all sorts of young people, regardless of race. But they were young that celebrated that. Go back to those 80s and 90s hip-hop. Go look at the video games. Go look at what's allowed now on network television, even at 8:30 at night. So the people that control all these images, we are creating generations of people that are more coarse, more raw, less respectful. I'm not a social conservative. I'm not Rush Limbaugh. Believe me, I am pro-pot, pro-gay marriage, socially liberal. But the people who control the images have created younger people who are more coarse, who are more raw, who are more numb. You increasingly see situations in this country where you'll have a fist fight in the stands and people sit around and cheer it. Yeah, fist fight. Take out their phones. Yeah, that guy's getting the living crap kicked out of him. Yeah. I'm not blaming just videos, just gamers. It is the decision makers and the people with capital in New York and L.A., which increasingly, for profit, allow the images and to deny that it creates younger. I'll tell you a story. I took my son. I made a mistake as a parent years ago. I make them all the time. I took my son to a Spider-Man movie. Now, that was a great movie. It was a tremendous movie. My son was too young. He was like 4 or 5 years old, and I made a mistake. It was a great movie. And in fact, I said at the time I thought it deserved to be nominated for an Oscar, but it never would because it was Spider-Man. But I learned something that day as a parent, is that images do sway young people, often young boys. And my son came home for the next 3 or 4 days, kicking, biting, everything. And I'm like, whoa, stallion, slow down. That was my fault, wasn't his. That was my fault as a parent. 100% my fault, not his fault. He had no business going to that movie at his age. And people will say, you're believe me, video gamers just are so defensive. They, like anything against them. I'm not against video gaming, but I'm saying our society continues to propel images. We are getting more coarse. We now videotape fights in stands. We cheer them on, and this is the society we've created. And even in the Isiah situation, even with the Frank Clark situation, again, we tolerate it because, well, it can make somebody muddy, and we use the excuse of, well, second chances. Everybody. Which we are a citizenry that allows second chances. So there's my soapbox for today. Stanzik's looking at me. He can't figure it out. All I'm saying is...
I just didn't know what your larger point was. I didn't know what you were driving at.
My larger point is that we love to blame, and everybody gets pious and on their high horse, all these media people about what's accepted. We're part of the problem. We allow it. By the way, here's a great example. When that police shooting happened in South Carolina, where it was awful, it was a cop shooting a young kid in the back. networks ran that video over and over like it was stock footage. Somebody died on camera. Parents lost a kid, and the media ran it like it was stock footage. Over and over and over. You don't run that over and over and over. We're so numb to it, we're part of the problem. That's my point. So we sit there as a media member, we're pious against this and that. Hell, we create the coarseness. It's not a guy in Kansas City making $38,000 a year. It's a guy in Madison Avenue making $38,000 an hour. It's a Hollywood exec who says, I know this is awful and it's violent, but it makes a lot of movie to millennials. So
right, yeah, but you can call it pious, but you still have to draw a line somewhere. You still have to say we have morals and we're not going to...
Yeah, that line moves based on the capital available. That line moves all the time on all the coast.
Right, but it does move all the time, but there has to be a line. You can't do nothing.
No, I'm not saying we can't do nothing as a society. I'm saying too many people point fingers when it comes to violence in society, and the power brokers are largely responsible. Not the citizenry, not a garbage man, not a school. It's the people on the coast with power to okay projects, video games, movies, shows, violence.
Right, I don't think you're actually saying this, but it almost sounds like you're saying Frank Clark hitting a woman is the media's fault, and that's ridiculous.
No, I'm not saying it. I'm saying is he grew up in a society where we have overly sexualized women. Look at magazines, go to a store, read shows. I listen to shows that are kid shows and they've got sexual references. It's like, whoa, it's 5:30 in the afternoon. Everybody on kid shows is dating. Like, is that really the message? If you grow up and we've over-sexualized women, and I sound like I'm Rush Limbaugh. I'm not. I know, I'm not. It's the furthest thing from what I am, but we love to point fingers on this stuff. The people in power in this country are largely to blame for it. The power brokers. You can't blame the average guy. I'm not saying he's not culpable for his actions and responsible, but you cannot deny that messages to young people are effective. That's why advertising works. Drink Mountain Dew, drink Mountain Dew, drink Mountain Dew. Kids drink Mountain Dew. Eat hash browns, fast food. They eat fast food. Images work with younger male brains and younger female brains, all brains. But when you get older, generally people can access what they want. But when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, you see ads over and over, games over and over, movies over and over, images over and over. It's very manipulative. So that's what I'm trying to say. I know it's very confusing.
Yeah, let's get Jeff Saturday in here. I don't know what just happened there.
God, I went in a soapbox. I'm sorry. I get like one of those a day. I know Vince is like, where did that go? That went totally sideways. I mean, you know what? You guys don't get it. Watch my beloved audience. They'll be like, oh, man, brother, preach it on.
You're in the Herd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
Welcome back to Herd on ESPN Radio. We got into a discussion earlier today about how fans can really do amazing things when they do things in unison or choreographed. And we were talking about the Yankee fans in 2004 mocking Pedro Martinez, who had said in the paper earlier in September, I'd like to tip my cap to the Yankee fans. They're like my daddy. Because he was so great, and yet they dominated him. And then during a Yankee-Red Sox game, when he came back to the Bronx to pitch, the Yankee fans in unison met Pedro Martinez with this, and I thought it was an amazing moment by fans in America.
These fans are amazing. Joe Torre saying before the game, no quote gets left untouched. Somebody says something in the papers, finds its way into a chant here at Yankee Stadium.
There's been a lot of those. I'll give you one that's pretty interesting. And this speaks really well of Canadians. We always know Canadians, our neighbors to the north, are pretty sharp. Years ago, a lady at a Toronto Maple Leafs game in Canada was singing. They were playing an American team. She was singing the American national anthem, and her mic went out. Listen to what happened. If an American singer was singing "Oh Canada" and the mic went out, could Americans finish the song? Very doubtful. So crowds can do amazing things. They really can. Good stuff today. Tony, we had an all-time guest list show. Pedro, Tony Dungy, Chauncey Billups was terrific. Jeff Saturday today. On a time of the year, I hope you go buy that Pedro book because it really shows an amazing career. That kid came from a tiny little house in the Dominican Republic. The Dodgers didn't think he was good enough to be a starter. He was undersized, steroid era, and became as great as any pitcher in a short period. Just unbelievable. I'm going to go 2 for the road early today because we have a couple of unbelievably interesting stories here. 2 for the road.
Well, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the road. 2 for the road in the herd.
Okay, now this is kind of sad. Any good financial planner will generally tell you to set aside at least 3 to 6 months living expenses for a rainy day, but only 25% of Americans have money set aside for emergencies. That's scary, right? That's living check to check. And a scientific study, this is really interesting. The Beatles and the Stones have been eclipsed by the hip-hop impact. The impact of hip-hop's arrival on the pop music scene has eclipsed that of the British invasion led by the Beatles, the Stones. Yeah. Now, the unusual study found there's been 3 revolutions on the charts. The early 90 emergence of rap and hip-hop on mainstream charts. The synth-led new wave movement of the 80s, like Duran Duran maybe, and the advent of the Beatles, Rolling Stones, The Who, and other British rockers in the early 60s. Now, obviously the critics are always going to be behind the Beatles and the Stones, because a lot of the critics are in the same age demo. But they wrote that the rise of rap and related genres represent the single most important event that shaped the musical structure. They went back, a computer analysis of 17,000 songs has found that. So hip-hop has more influence than this synthetic stuff and the Beatles. I think hip-hop has led to, I will say this about hip-hop, and you can't say this about the Beatles, it has led to fashion changes, movie changes, sports changes. Oh, I think hip-hop has undeniable impact on society. The Beatles did not. My sister loved the Beatles. She didn't buy clothes based on that. It didn't change fashion or style.
Yeah, but couldn't I argue, that the Beatles influenced rap lyrically and musically?
No. I think
I just tried to.
I don't think it works. I don't think anything...
Next time you say, couldn't I argue, I'm going to say no.
By the way, were you West Coast or East Coast?
I think we're all East Coasters in here. What about you?
I had Tupac's back. I was Tupac and Snoop Dogg. Those were my guys.
Do you even know Snoop Dogg's real name?
Yeah, his son plays football now for UCLA. Calvin Brodus.
All right, what about Biggie's real name?
Maury Cohen. I have no idea what Biggie's name was. I have no idea.
Christopher Wallace.
Okay, I know now. Okay, Christopher Wallace. You ever watch those, like, behind the music, hip-hop stories? They're fascinating. That movie on Biggie, unbelievable. Yeah, no, I'm a West Coaster.
You're telling me this is more influential than the Beatles? That study's a bunch of crap.
No, but I'm saying hip-hop influenced fashion, media.
Yeah, but the Beatles influenced, like, people all had the Beatles hair, all those haircuts in the fashion.
Oh, God. Yeah. So they influenced barbers. Well, you're right. Paul McCartney, he really influenced barbers across America. 2 for the road brought to you by Ferguson. Over 60 years, name pro contractors count on. Paul McCartney influenced thick eyebrows.
Yes!
Biggie, Tupac, Snoop Dogg influenced a generation of kids. How they dress, how they think, how they talk, everything.
I'm not denying their influence. There's a lot of influence there, but the Beatles' influence is more.
Cowboys Vice President Stephen Jones on the show tomorrow. That'll be fun. Can I jump on his bus? That's a crazy guy. That's a fun team. Crazy, wild, nutty. The Herd.
Check out The Herd with Colin Cowherd weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNradio.com, and on ESPNU. The Thundering Herd Podcast. Two of baseball's best go head-to-head in Major League action when the Tigers head to St. Louis to face the Cardinals.
That one is gone.
The pregame at 7 Eastern, first pitch at 8, Sunday on ESPN and ESPN Radio.